Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Voices of ASEAN. My name is Beatrice, and I'm very excited about today's show because joining us is a living legend. Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad needs little to no introduction. He is the longest-serving Prime Minister in Malaysia's history, holding office for a combined 24 years, from 1981 to 2003, and then from 2018 to 2020. Under his leadership, Malaysia saw its most dramatic transformation from an agriculture-based economy to an industrialized one. His influence has also been felt outside of Malaysia. His straight-talking, no-nonsense style, coupled with his courage of standing up to richer, more developed nations, have made him a hero to the developing world. And today, Tun Dr Mahathir will be talking to us on his vision for ASEAN, his legacy, and what the New World Order really means to him. And if you look at the overlay we have here for you, one of his quotes, which is so real, he says, if you want to be listened to, you must be very powerful, strong, or very rich. Otherwise, nobody listens to you. If we function as a regional organization, as ASEAN, then we have more people to argue in our favor. And that was inspirational for us. So let's have him here to talk live to us, and joining me live from Kuala Lumpur, here is Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad. Good morning, Tun.
Morning.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Bless you. Tun Mahathir, you have made a global impact. In South Africa, people remember you as one of the most fervent opponents of apartheid in the Commonwealth and around the world. In Bosnia, people still remember you for your support during the Bosnian Civil War and for opening up Malaysia to refugees. You are seen by many Palestinians as a hero because of your steadfast opposition to the Israeli occupation. You are seen as a role model and a leader in the Muslim world for your constant calls for Muslim unity and development. You stood down offers from IMF during the ASEAN financial crisis, and you did it your way, Tun, by pegging the ringgit to the dollar. You stood your ground against George Soros, and you called a spade a spade. In a world dominated by Western narratives, you have long been the voice of the developing world. It takes considerable confidence and understanding to go against the grain like how you did, Tun Mahathir. People either love you or hate you. There is no in-between. But what I want to know today is what made the man? Was it the way you were raised? How did you get the clarity of vision to see further than most? And how does it feel finally to know that you have made such an impact? I know it's 4 questions in one, but the floor is yours, Tun.
Thank you. Well, even when I was small, I tend to notice a lot of things which other people just ignore. For example, I felt that why should Malaysia be poor when the other countries are so rich? We also can be as rich as the other countries. At that time, of course, I have not seen other countries. I lived through 4 different regimes. Malaysia was under the British. It was conquered by the Japanese. The Japanese handed Malaysia to the Thais, and finally the British came back and we became independent. So I've gone through the many phases in the development of Malaysia. And of course, in the meantime, I travel a lot to many countries, developed and developing. The things I have observed there influence my thinking. For example, how is it that the Japanese, after losing the war, could recover so quickly and become the second economic power in the world? So I visited Japan, I look at them and try to figure out how they manage. And I find that the value system of the Japanese contributes to their success.
That's true.
For example, the Japanese do not like to feel ashamed of themselves. So whenever they do something, they want to do the best so that people will look up to them and not look down upon them. So the Japanese have a strong fear of feeling ashamed of themselves. For example, if they fail to carry out some instruction given by their boss, they go so far as to commit harakiri.
Yeah, it's self-pride.
So,
They have a lot of self-pride.
yeah, so that is the character of the Japanese.
Yes.
So because they want to be looked up to and admired, they do everything very, very well.
Yes.
And their products have become the benchmark for most of those products in the market.
Yes.
So I thought that if we have the culture of the Japanese, we can also do the same. And indeed, we try to instill a new culture among Malaysians. To a certain extent, we succeeded because we moved away from agriculture to industry, manufacturing industry. And manufacturing industry is better than agriculture because it doesn't require land, big pieces of land. On 1 acre of land, we can have a factory that gives employment to 500 people. Whereas 1 acre of land for agriculture does not even need one person, I mean, need more than one person. So and the way of work also is different. So we felt that Malaysia can develop just like the Japanese develop, if the people would do their work properly, and if the government bring about stability in the country and no violence in the country, no revolution or anything like that. With that, investors who are ready to come to Malaysia, because we give them special privileges so that they come and invest in Malaysia.
That's right.
It was eventually called Foreign Direct Investment, FDI. But we claim that we started earlier than others.
Yes, we did.
Whereas many of the newly independent countries did not like to have their former colonial masters come back and do business in the country. We went the other way. We invited foreigners.
Yes.
Whether they were former colonial imperialists or not, doesn't matter.
As long as they had money to invest.
When they invested in producing parts of their needs, they created employment. The people become more rich, and the government also began to earn more income from the businesses that was introduced into the country by the foreign investors. So this is something that I did because I thought about the countries which did well. Why? And once I did realize that they did certain things, among which would be industrialization and local manufacturing, we took that path, and lots of money flowed in, investment fund flowed into the country, jobs were created, people had more money, and they spent a lot of money, of course. Businesses then make profit, and the government collect taxes. So that's how we develop Malaysia.
Fantastic. And I think we owe a lot to you, Tun, because you started the ball rolling, and now we just have to keep up with the momentum. Do you think we are?
Yeah, now we are still quite dependent on foreign direct investment.
Yes, we are.
But we begin to think about other ways of enriching the country. We find that foreign direct investment is now an accepted means of growing the economy. So many other countries, newly independent countries, were able to attract foreign investment. And they were able to offer cheaper labor and much easier bureaucratic procedures.
Yes.
So
True.
they are in fact more attractive than us now.
Mm.
Before there was nobody competing with us, but now we have these other countries also attracting foreign direct investment.
Yes.
So we feel that the time has come for us to invest ourselves
Yes.
and grow big and sell to the world market. For
Absolutely.
example,
Absolutely.
we decided to produce rubber gloves. And because of rubber gloves and because of the pandemic, rubber gloves were much needed
Yeah.
all over the world. And very quickly, we became the biggest rubber glove producer in the world.
In the world,
So
yes.
that is the way to go. That
Absolutely.
we should start industries where we would be first among the industrialized nation in the production of certain items. For example, microchips. We produce microchip for the whole world, and of course, it has benefited us
Of course.
in the sense of investment in factories to produce microchips.
Thank you. Tun, you are the last of the ASEAN strongmen from the 80s. Many of your contemporaries from that era have already passed on. Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, Suharto of Indonesia, Marcos of the Philippines, and Prem Tinsulonanda, I hope I'm getting that pronunciation right, of Thailand. That was the time when Southeast Asian countries started rising up, and this is because of strong, determined leaders such as yourself and those other men. Do you think there are such leaders here today to help push ASEAN to the next level? And if not, what does ASEAN need to truly fulfill the promise it began many years ago?
Those leaders who founded ASEAN, they were, well, giants among the people of the ASEAN countries.
Yes.
Because at that time, there were not many capable leaders. So these 4 or 5 people became very prominent, and they connect it with the achievement of the ASEAN countries.
Yeah.
The ASEAN countries grew during that period, and people know the names of these leaders, and they are the pioneers in many ways of developing the country. But later on, of course, the others are not so well identified. And besides that, what has happening now is that the leaders keep on changing. Now, during my time before, the leaders that you named just now, these be permanent leaders. They were there for years and years, and they even know each other personally in the ASEAN whenever they meet, because ASEAN had regular meetings of the heads of government. So we were able to work together, and we don't have to deal with a newly elected leader. But nowadays, the leaders of all the countries have been changing, and they don't stay for long. And before they can establish themselves, they are out and somebody new comes along.
Betul.
So the
too often.
personal relationship between the leaders of ASEAN is not possible now.
That's
because
true.
We may see a leader one day, and the next meeting there's another leader, same leader. So we have to establish personal contacts and personal friendship among us. That was why those people were well known. These are the people who gained power immediately after they became independent.
So without that kind of solidarity, what you're saying, Tun, is how do we move forward? How does ASEAN become the tiger that it envisioned itself to be now, when with so many differing leaders? How do we solve that besides forging a relationship? Can we ever regain that stronghold that ASEAN once thought it could have?
The political leaders may change, but civil servant, the senior officers in the civil service who invariably attend the ASEAN meeting to provide backing and to wherever the leader may not be conversant with, they have to be consulted.
Yeah,
These
right.
people are more permanent. They
Yes.
stay on as leaders quite a long time. And if we find a new leader, but his staff may be the old staff. So in that way, we can establish good relation.
Absolutely. You're so right, Tun. The main reason we created Voice of ASEAN was because we felt there should be narratives determined by Southeast Asians for Southeast Asians. As of now, the image of this region and individual countries specifically are totally controlled by what I feel is Western skewed international media, and they do not go into the depths of who we are, what we are capable of, and why we make policies the way we do. We get demonized by the elites who control global media if we don't fit into their compartmentalized concept of how we should behave. But you, Tun Mahathir, you spoke about this way before all this. I remember you talking about us taking ownership of our region and our narratives from the time I was a little girl, which probably inspired the creation of Voice of ASEAN to a certain extent. And during the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit in 2019, you reiterated that it is important for ASEAN to speak with one voice in order to assert its position as an economic power. So I would absolutely love to have your thoughts, Tun, on how together as a region, using Voice of ASEAN and other means, we can solidify efforts to leverage our worth to an international market in terms of both business and politics.
Well, the ASEAN countries were in the past colonized by different powers. The British ruled Malaysia and the state in Borneo. Then the Dutch ruled Indonesia.
Yep.
And Philippines was at first ruled by the Spanish, and then they had Americans.
Yeah.
So we were introduced to different systems of government, different way of thinking. So initially we find it unusual for certain things to be done for the country because we do it differently.
Yeah.
For example, Malaysia believes in forward planning. We plan for 5 years, and sometimes we plan even for 30 years. And we are familiar with the planning of the forward movement of the country.
Yes.
But some other countries do not seem to be planning in detail. They may have some idea about developing the country, but the detail, the work that has to be done is not laid out. So because of that, sometimes the country did not become very attractive to investors, both local and foreign.
Yes.
So, but once we have developed good relation, and we begin to understand that one of the biggest assets we have is a big population.
Yeah.
It is half the size of China. We have the size of China. China has about 1.2 billion people.
Yes.
We have only 600 million people.
Yes.
So we realize that if the market is a single market, it is a big market.
Yes, it is.
So we keep on probing or trying to get other ASEAN countries to specialize in different businesses so that there is no repetition of the same thing. And indeed, we went into heavy industries. We allocate some industries for different country. For example, Malaysia decided to go into the production of steel.
Yep.
And some other product, but others should go into sugar or things like that.
Yes.
Then we combine our strength and we can become very powerful.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, after the first leaders left the scene, the others did not follow through with the plans laid out. Everyone of them want to do practically the same thing. But I still believe that the size of the ASEAN market is a big asset for them.
Yes.
That they can use it to test their own products. They can use it to attract foreign investment and grow their country.
It's something like the European Union where they leverage on each other and they have more bargaining power if they work together as one bloc. Correct, Tun?
Yeah. It happened, of course, after they lost their empire.
Yeah.
All the European nations had their empire all over the world.
Yes.
After the war, everybody was, everybody considered empires as not something to be carried through because people must be given their independence.
Yeah.
So because of that, we have a difficult time trying to connect with each other.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I hope we can at least have a voice because, you know, for me, when I read about us in the mainstream media, it's always very negative. It's always very negative, you know, about the countries. We don't hear what's really happening. So I think it's also important we have a voice together so we determine like who's our shakers and movers, who are our strongmen, what we are really doing, what are the business opportunities here. We need that. And then the rest will come, I think.
I agree with you. We need an ASEAN media.
Yes.
Even now we don't have. We
That's
don't
true.
have a single voice for ASEAN. Each one does his own thing.
Exactly.
And promotion, they are not big, and the world do not listen to the reporting by the state.
Yes.
Of
Yes.
not ASEAN report.
Exactly.
So it's good to have an ASEAN organization that speaks for all the ASEAN countries.
Absolutely. I think there's a saying, he who owns media rules the world. So coming to about ruling the world, Tun, in 2015, in an international conference on the New World Order organized by the Pradana Global Peace Foundation, I saw this video and you riveted the crowd. You stunned the world at large with your declaration that the New World Order is to establish a one world government bent on destabilizing smaller nations so that they can succumb to this New World Order. And true to grain, you spoke your heart out. You said, and it was a bit chilling, that the creation of peace around the world would probably be the peace of the graveyard, a depopulation campaign for the world. So were these information something you were privy to, Tun, in meetings, or is it something you deduced from pieces of the puzzle you put together as it went along?
I mentioned just now about losing their empires. Once they lost their empires, they lost their market. Because these were captive markets. The British, for example, introduced imperialism preference. You have to buy British all the time.
Yes.
And you export mainly also to Britain. So that limited our market.
Yes.
So once we became independent, we find that isolated as one country, we could not speak with a strong voice. We need to have a strong voice for ASEAN. So if we do have an ASEAN radio or TV station broadcasting reports about ASEAN by ASEAN, that would be more correct. Otherwise, they would be picking on some rumors. For example, Malaysia was accused of employing child labor and of slave labor. This was reported in the Western press. And
really?
Of course, and they said that, well, because of that, they want to close their market to Malaysia. Even now, it is happening. So
they made it up, or they just exaggerate things?
Yeah, because they want to get back at their old market, the imperial nation before. And as you know, once they lost their empire, they immediately formed the European Union to
Mm.
enlarge their market. But even that left them without the markets of the world. So they introduced free trade. Trade should be free. Nobody should impose very high tariffs, etc. So every country should be accessible to every other country. It sounds good because then our market will become bigger, but the benefit goes largely to the trading nations of the past, the people, the empires of the past. They are familiar with most part of the world, and they gain. If there is free trade, they are the first to make gains. Maybe later on we may get some opportunity to export to them. But in the past, the imperial powers ensured that they produce all the manufactured goods and their market is their own empire, and we produce only raw materials for them. We have no added value.
Ada udang di sebalik batu.
Yeah.
So that is what is the plan about. What do you think would be the repercussions of a free trade?
Well, free trade means we don't impose sanction or tariff, very high tariff, so that all goods can move through to and fro. But we produce only raw material. This ASEAN country. That's all that we can export to the rich developed countries. But the rich developed countries have got so many things that they manufacture and they want to sell in this market. They make cars, they make aeroplanes, they make all kinds of manufactured goods, and they want to sell their goods to the world market. So if there is a free trade, then they can have access to all the markets for themselves. But for us, raw materials only, and raw materials have a limited market. So we do not grow with free trade the way the European countries, the manufacturers grow and reach and export their products to the world market.
So do you think that then from that time, from the enactment of the European Union to now the New World Order, it's the same thing, the same agenda? So the New World Order is basically control again? Is that what you're saying, Tun? But
yes.
It's a different form of control, with more of a globalized control.
With the free trade idea came the idea of a World Trade Organization, WTO. But the World Trade Organization is basically to control trade. And you can do this, you cannot do this, and all that. So instead being free to trade, we are now under the WTO, and they can appeal to the WTO for any so-called wrongdoing by some countries. Mainly, of course, the newly developing countries like Malaysia. So by introducing the WTO, they gain control of the market. But beyond that, they also have free trade groups of countries form a local sort of local cooperation, and they benefit from the free trade because they keep their markets to themselves. What other thing is that they do is that they can complain that Malaysia produced rubber by cutting trees. So cutting trees is bad. So they will not buy.
Like oil palm, it's deforestation. So oil palm shouldn't be used because Malaysia and Indonesia are the only ones exporting it, correct?
Yeah. So this kind of international pressure affect our growth.
I see. Yep. So is there a depopulation program, Tun?
What?
Is there a depopulation program that the New World Order is pushing?
No, we are not. I think Asia is growing in terms of numbers, but I think Africa is contributing more because Africa, a lot of the practices are still old practices. They are not fully the health system there of these African countries is not as good. But in Malaysia, we have a very extensive health regime here, and we at one time we introduced birth control because we want to slow down the rate of growth of the country.
I see.
And as you know, China limited each family with only one child.
That's right. That's right. And it's still the most populous country in the world.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
We have a few comments from the crowd. Before I go to my last question, I think we have a short period of time. We have about a few more minutes left. Can I see all the questions from the crowd? Okay, there is a Nick Sharil who says, what are the qualities and values that you like to see in future Malaysian leaders?
We want Malaysia to be governed by honest people, by politicians who think first of their country, how to develop their country. We do not want corrupt leaders.
Yeah.
The pain of all newly independent countries is that many of the leaders were corrupt. They were not corrupt before, but the moment they gain power, they abuse that power.
That's true.
And we need to have government that has integrity, that can be trusted, that is efficient, and that values international trade, because it's one way to grow the country.
Yes.
But we accept, almost all of us accepted the election as a way to get a government. But this system is very open to abuse. For example, they may bribe the voters, and then this kind of people will get in, winning through bribery, and obviously they are not going to form good government.
Yes. I have another interesting question from Taufik Iskandar. He's asking, if you were to lead Malaysia once again, how would you put in place a succession planning to ensure reform and growth trajectory, as well as social cohesion that can be maintained?
The first thing we have to do is, of course, to set a proper administrative machinery. The government must have good staff, capable and experienced.
Yes.
Once we have that, then the political leaders, the elected leaders, can then plan for the future. They can, but the planning has to be carried out by the staff, not by themselves. So if they have good staff that is not corrupt and will do the work well, then of course Malaysia would be able to develop once again.
Well, I believe. Sorry, Tun, go ahead.
Well, I believe that Malaysia has tremendous potential.
Yes,
but
I believe
the moment the government is weak and it's not very efficient.
We need a check and balance to be able to ensure that we move on without any one party having too much power over the other, so that there's always a check and balance. Do you agree?
There is, but although we may have, for example, we say that we should separate the legislative from executive, from legal system.
Yes.
We should. But in fact, we find the tendency of the elected leaders to manipulate the executive to their advantage. And of course, this does not help the country provide good service to people as a whole.
Yes.
Certainly to investors.
So hopefully we can have that kind of demarcation eventually, so that there's always a good check, a healthy check and balance.
Yeah.
I have another question from Jonathan. In what is now seen as a recognized battle of wills and power between the West and China, where does ASEAN stand in this very possible conflict? What can ASEAN do to mitigate the threat and over-influence of both sides?
Actually, at this moment, we don't have a single, develop a single policy towards China. Some countries are very close to China. Some countries are closer to America, for example.
Yeah, correct.
So our policies are not the same.
Yeah.
But for Malaysia, we ignore the confrontation between US and China. We want to be friendly with both because these are big markets, good markets for us.
Yes,
so
they
we
are.
support America, no China. We want to be neutral, and we want to maintain our trade relations with these two countries.
I have one more question from Terry C. I'm not sure if this is something that you would answer. Is digital ringgit and legalization of bitcoins good for Malaysia's economy in this digitalization area? Are there more questions? Sorry.
Well, digitalization holds the promise that it will be very difficult to cheat, for example, because you don't handle fiat money, you don't handle paper money at all. So whenever you make a payment, you make it through pressing buttons and like that on your phone, and it goes straight to the bank.
Yeah.
There is no middleman. So when there is no middleman, then of course the chances of corruption is much less. So this new digitalization holds a promise that business would be cleaner, but it requires some skill to accept this new system without the usual money. People are still familiar with fiat money, and so they like writing checks. But in this new system, you don't have to write any checks. You want to withdraw some money from the bank, you just directly deal with the bank. So even banks, many of the branches will have no business because people don't have to go to the bank, but they can do business without going to the bank. They can do it from home.
Is it safe, especially with bitcoins, when there's no regulation? Do you think it's safe?
No, Bitcoin is a different thing. It is a different system of money. But you can also use the same system of values given to money, but you don't use actual cash in your dealing. You deal through your sending a message through your phone, for example, that the bank is to pay so and so much. So the bank can then transfer that order to the account held by the other person, the person buying the product. So no money is used.
Yeah, I suppose it might work in cutting down corruption. So how much more time do I have with you, Tun?
Well, I have a few more minutes.
5 minutes?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Then I will, I'm afraid I can't take any more of the comments. Sorry, audience, because there's how to fight corruption, but I think we've answered that almost in the earlier question. So I'll go back to my last question for Tun Mahathir. Looking back at your life and achievements, given the chance to go back in time, would you have done anything differently, Tun?
There could be something that may be done in a different way, but the main things that I wanted for the country would remain the same. For example, infrastructure. We must have the right infrastructure, which we did in the first plan, where we built a highway practically from Singapore to Thailand through our country.
That was excellent.
This also the train system need to be upgraded, and a few other things can be done in order to get the country to grow once again.
Yes.
We have some idea about that.
Anything else, Tun?
Well, we are, as you know, I'm still involved in party politics. I founded another party again, and this party is very much against corruption. Our people can have taken an oath not to accept bribes. You see, so
excellent. It's a first.
We hope that when we win, we can clean up the government machinery and provide good service to the people.
So everyone takes an oath that they will never accept corruption, any bribe.
The top leaders, the top leaders of the party have taken an oath on the Quran that they will not accept any bribe, nor will they bribe anybody. We stand by our promise to provide good governance.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that was so sweet. Hearing that is actually very sweet for all of us, Rakyat. Thank you so much for this interview, Tun. Really appreciate it. God bless you and wish you many more years. So join us live tomorrow, everyone, 30th November at 5 p.m. Malaysian time for an interview with Omar Khan, Director of the International Offices, Dubai Chamber of Commerce and Industry, on the upcoming Global Business Forum ASEAN 2021 in Dubai, of which Voice of ASEAN is a media partner. Voice of ASEAN thanks you for your time, and we'll be uploading a recorded version of this dialogue with Tun Mahathir in our portal for those of you who missed it. Thank you so much.